build another Rails thing so we can see the whole process again, and you all can follow along, and we'll make sure everybody's stuff is working, and we can postman, and everybody will be able to follow along. So this will be a follow along day. And we want to make sure everybody is up to speed. So let's not build Safari again because we've done that. Let's not build employee or movie again. What should we build an app to keep track of?
Classes?
Okay, classes.
Company database.
Company database.
Theme park admissions.
Theme park admissions. Okay.
When I say classes, I mean like gym classes or something.
Gym classes.
Food?
Food.
I
Yeah.
like Mira's idea.
Food. Yeah. Okay. Cool. Let's do food. So let's make a new app. So let's make a new app. So let's be in your directory where you're going to make new apps. So this is not inside of a Rails app folder. This is not inside of an app existing folder. This is like inside of your like SDG Unit 3 Week 8 folder, right? If I do a list directory in that, I should see other directories of work that I've done, not like gem files and app and blah, right? So in your like Unit 3 Week 8, we're going to do something like this. And this should build a new folder, right? You should get an output that looks something like this. Did anybody not get this? Who did get this? People are still working on this.
Sorry.
So working, I have a question. So when I did the home list, I did Rails new and then I did that.
No, this is one command, Rails new, this whole thing. Rails new, skip spring, database Postgres, API, name of your app. These things here are extra, right? You can always, if you do Rails new and the name of your app, you're going to get not an API app, you're not going to get Postgres, and you're going to get Spring. So Rails new, no Spring please, please use Postgres, we're only doing API apps so far in the name of our app.
So that's why I had an issue last
Probably, because you double created.
Things that were two different ones.
Rails new, blah. So who did get an output that looks like this? Yes, 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 yes. Cool. So let's go into our kitchen folder. Bless you. And here's going to be a suggestion. Notice that when I go into my kitchen folder, it's telling me that I have a Git project already, and that I have a whole bunch of files in this directory. And if I type git status, it shows me that I have a whole bunch of files to commit. Rails by default will make a Git project for you. It automatically does git init for you, but it does not do any commit. So all of these files are uncommitted. I like to commit this folder right away so that the work that I do on top I can see. So all of these files Rails generated for me by default. The first thing I like to do after doing a CD into my project is do a commit. I tend to call it initial commit, or call it like Rails generated app, something like that. Some people say initial commit, whatever you like. Oh, I forgot to do git add dot.
Yeah, I was wondering about that.
Git add dot and then git commit.
Can you show me the first comment again?
It's in
file
Slack.
was not created.
It's in Slack. You want to copy it? It's in Slack. Say it again.
I just got this Ruby sauce is deprecated, and then I just realized it failed in Bundler. I don't know how to do that.
Okay, so who did not get?
I'm just trying to Windows. Got it.
Who did not get at the end, it should say, if it worked correctly, it should say bundle complete,
Yeah.
some number of gem dependencies, some number of gems now installed, blah, blah, blah.
It's got create mode.
I'm gonna come look at every one of your apps, because
Yeah, we got. I got
what the
same
fuck?
thing, create mode. That's fine.
Yours is fine.
Okay, great.
Yours is fine.
Great.
There's no GitHub, so hub browse don't work yet. Because we did not create a GitHub
Yeah, I
project,
created,
we only created a Git project.
yeah, I did it 2 seconds later.
You created a GitHub folder? Why?
Not folder, like a,
Did you do a hub
Repo.
create?
yeah, I did.
After
Because,
CD
Try and
kitchen,
follow along
and
with
then
me.
lines,
okay.
And don't do extra stuff, because you might dig yourself a hole.
git add dot,
So in lecture, it's better if you just follow what we're doing.
and then git commit,
Because if you do extra
right,
stuff,
and then for
you
your
will
message,
diverge from the
put
learning
initial
path.
commit.
And if we follow along, we'll be on the nice happy path. We want to be on the happy
For
path.
okay.
Because we're trying to practice
Initial
this.
commit for your message for the git commit.
So what
So what did
happened
yours
Oh,
say?
whatever it is.
is
Yeah,
telling it up
but that's
there.
what he wrote. He wrote initial commit for the, in quotations,
I mean,
and that's it. That's where you're supposed to be.
no,
Yeah. That's fine.
I always
think,
feel
but I would see the
icky
bundle.
with like doing stuff like that. I guess it's always kind of full.
Let him look at it then to check.
Oh, you said skip string.
Oh, you wanted. Oh,
Did you see that?
okay, that's why.
See,
Yeah.
no worries. Now you're
Leave a reaction.
Oh my god.
Just kidding.
Alright. Let's see what's
Give
so
it one. Give it
You are in good shape.
Okay.
Yay, okay. We all have kitchens.
There we go.
So in your kitchen folder, let's open up VS Code. Right. And now we should see our whole Ruby, our Rails application. Now let's make sure that we have our database. Rails DB create. So as soon as we make a new Rails application, it helps if we git add git commit that initial commit, and it helps that we do a Rails DB :create, just to make sure that we have our databases. Other than getting extra warnings from our Windows friends, bless you, did anybody get created database kitchen development and test? But you probably get all the warnings about blah blah blah. But
Yeah.
eventually it should say created these databases. Perfect, perfect. So now let's create some model, or at least a model, to keep track of stuff in the kitchen. Right? But this time, however, I'm going to make your lives simpler. Remember yesterday we did Rails generate model, and we described a database model, and then we had to go create the controller and write all that code, and then go make the resources and the routes. Well, Rails has one command that does all that for us, all at once, and it's called a scaffold. So if instead of Rails generate model, we generate a scaffold. Let's generate a scaffold for food. And don't type this and press enter yet. Let's work the entire thing out and then press enter. So in our kitchen, we're going to have food. Let's come up with some things that we might want for our food. Maybe we have the name of the food, right?
The type.
So yeah, type, cool.
Okay.
So now type is a really good example. It's one of the columns in Rails that it reserves for its own purposes. So instead of type, let's come up with a different word.
Category?
Yeah, category is.
So sorry.
My Rails DB3, it said cannot connect to server. and also-
Oh, you forgot the sudo service Postgres start.
I didn't know that though.
It probably only because maybe he rebooted or shut down or something. Yeah. So instead of type, let's use category.
Okay.
Very good. We would have run into that buzzsaw later, and Rails would have been like, hey,
Yeah.
type means a certain thing to Rails. So type is one of the few column names that Rails kind of reserves for its own purpose. Cool. Maybe the calories. Maybe that's an integer, right? How many calories the food is. What other kind of things might we want to keep around about a food?
Delicious.
Price?
Yeah, a price. Yeah. Delicious. Rating.
Yeah.
Rating. Thank you. That's easier to spell. Manager. What about what about when it expires?
Oh,
Okay.
So let's talk about expires. Yeah, expiration. That's good.
Yeah.
So, what kind of data do you think the expiration will be?
It's
It's gonna be a
time.
text.
A date. Right. But like this expires on November 7th,
Yeah.
right?
'Cause-
More like a date. Now, Rails gives us two kinds of dates, a date and a date and a time, right? So, food, when you turn it over, right, Best Buy or expires, it gives you a date,
Never a time.
but never a time. It's not like this expires at 4 o'clock exactly on November the 7th. So
That'd be
if,
helpful.
yeah, so if we're talking about a time, sorry, if we're talking about a date, we call that field expires on. It expires on a date. If we're talking about a specific point in time, we would say it expires at. Right? This food expires at 4 o'clock on Thursday.
Could you?
This food expires on Tuesday. Question?
So expires at would be a specific date.
And time. Expires on will be a date. This is not a requirement. It's just a convention that Rails developers go with. So if I look at your model, your schema, and I see a terminate at, my brain is going to think that's a date and a time. If I look at your model and see terminate on, I think that's a date. Not a requirement, but a convention. And it's a pretty helpful convention, right? And it even kind of has English. This expires on Tuesday. This expires at 3:15 p.m. Tuesday. Cool. Is there anything else in here we want? Name, category, calories, price, rating, expires on. Let's come up with a Boolean. What would be like a true or false thing for food? We might want.
Came from the store?
Yeah, it came from
Or
store.
made it?
Yeah, made it.
Gluten free.
Ah, gluten free. That's a good one.
Yeah.
Gluten free is going to be a Boolean. Cool. So I did Rails generate scaffold food. Food is the name of my model. Name. Notice I didn't put a colon anything here, so it's going to be a
Column?
yeah, it's a column. But what
Yeah.
kind of column? If I don't put something there, it's going to be a
text.
string. Yes, without any colon something, this will be a string. Category will be a string. Calories, price, rating are all integers. Expires on as a date, and gluten free is a Boolean. So let's try this.
So, can you help me? I accidentally hit enter without even finishing
What after
my
what?
sentence. After integer p, because I was
Cool.
trying to write price.
So you did this. Let's talk about like how we fix those mistakes. And did you get something like this?
Yeah, I did.
Cool. So in addition to Rails generate, we also have Rails destroy. So
Okay.
if you make a mistake, you can run Rails destroy scaffold food.
Okay,
And that will blast food out of the system,
great.
as long as we haven't run our migrations. Right? So notice that Rails generate scaffold made all these files. Rails destroy scaffold food removed all these
I
files.
got a conflict.
When you were doing,
The
Let's take a look.
Wow, I think it's because I forgot the word destroy.
Yes.
Probably.
Oh my
Yeah.
god.
Rails destroy scaffold food. So for those who are following on and generating, and we'll catch Anastasia up, did everybody get something that looks like this? Should have created a migration. It should have created a model. It should have created a resources, and it should have created a controller. Did everybody get this?
Yes.
Thumbs up? Yes? Yes?
Yes.
Yes? Mira, yes?
Comparing them? Yeah.
Yeah. Cool. And we'll get Anastasia caught up. Cool. So here's why I like making that first commit. Look at my folder over here now. See how some parts of my folder are green and some are yellow? This is, I can now see all the places where I've changed code in my app. Right? That's why that first commit is really nice. Right? So let's go take a look at the places where we've changed code. I always like to go look at the migration first. This is a top tip. Go look at your migration first, because what this will catch is misspellings or errors in the columns we created. Right? Kind of like how Anastasia, like she pressed enter after like the P in price or something.
Yeah.
Right? So like maybe hers, if she hadn't caught it, maybe it would have looked like this.
You would have.
And you're like, what happened to all the rest of my stuff? So the migration is the first place we can go check to see, did we get all the columns we wanted? Yes. Well, there's our name. It's a string as we expected. There's the category. It's a string like we expected. Calories, price, and rating are all integers. Cool. The expires on is the date, and gluten-free is the Boolean. Awesome. This looked pretty good. So did everybody get something that looks like this in your migrations?
Can we like select, like drop down and select either like,
No.
no, we can do that.
No.
Okay.
Because that's more on the user interface side,
Okay.
right? And we're going to learn how to do that when we finally integrate our React front end and our back end.
It all comes together.
Yeah, it all comes together. So then after checking the migration, the next thing we should go look at is, did we get a model? Hey, look, our model folder is green because it created a food model for us. Sweet. Just like we expected. The controller folder is also green. Hey, it created a foods controller for us, right? One food, many foods. Look at that. Whoa. It wrote all of the index, show, create, update, destroy for us auto-magically.
The scaffold.
The scaffold did this
Magically.
auto-magically.
Nice.
Rather than just create a model, if we create a scaffold, it will write a very generic controller for us. But guess what? It's probably 90% of what we need anyway. Because look at what we have for index. This looks just like we did yesterday with the animals, right? The show, the create, the update, the destroy. Look, it even has the food params, require food, permit name, category, calories, price, rating, expires on, and gluten-free. So a scaffold, just like a scaffold when they're building a building, helps you get started, right? You put up a scaffold, you're gonna do construction, right? You stand on the scaffold and build the next layer, and then stand on the scaffold and build the next layer. That's the idea of a scaffold here. It helps you get you started. It's often a good place to start with for our initial work.
Food controller was supposed to be there.
Foods controller, yes. Foods controller. We should have a migration that has all of our columns. We should have a food model that lets us work with our database. And we should have a foods controller in the controllers folder.
Controllers folder.
App controllers, foods controller.
Foods controller. Got it.
Yeah. And then we should also have a config routes. Hey, look at that. It added resources, foods for us.
Oh my goodness.
It kind of did all the steps for us. Awesome. This is why if you have your ERD ready with all the attributes you think you need, Rails generate scaffold is a great place to start because it will generate most of the code that you need to write.
So
Right.
the nouns were those things you typed that for the ERD.
Yeah, the nouns would be like our food. and the attributes are the little things we write inside the box. How will we describe a food? Well, we would give it a name, and it's a particular category, and it's got calories, right? If I were creating an employee system, I would have an employee, and that employee has a name, and they have a birth date, and they have a salary, and they have a title, and they have all the things that describe our noun, right? Our adjectives, right?
Yes.
The things that describe a noun, right?
Adjectives, yeah.
Adjectives. So our nouns are our big blocks in our ERD. They become our models. The adjectives become the columns or the attributes of our.
So what is the test for?
The test folder is for writing code to test whether or not our code works. So when you get a little more advanced, we just don't write code and blindly send it to the server. We write code that checks our code. That tests to see, does our code do what it said? Does the index of this food application show a list of foods? Right, that's one of the requirements. Just like in the homework it said, hey, add a search for animals, that if I give you a species, you only give me back those species. How do you know that code works? Well, you could try it in the browser, or you could write a test to check that code. So test is Ruby code we write to check other Ruby code for correctness. We write test code to check our model code. We write test code to check our controller code.
So before we destroy anything, can we test it first?
But you have to write the tests. You have to write the test. Ruby does not write the test for you. Right? It makes a file for you, but you have to come in and write those tests. We don't cover testing because y'all can barely handle writing code at this point.
Right.
And writing code that checks test code is harder.
Yeah, it is really.
This is like, this is like after Suncoast, go learn with your
6 months
mentor.
from now.
When you get on the job with your mentor, your senior, your code partner, work on writing tests. Once you have the basics underneath you, then we can talk about testing. So this has, I think, pretty much all the things we need, right? We need a migration, a model, a controller, and a route. That's what we worked on yesterday. Scaffold generates all that for us. You're going to see that it's a blessing and a curse eventually, but right now it seems like just a pure blessing.
Yeah.
Right? So let's migrate our migration change and get our table in the database. Bless you. You should get something that says create foods migrated. When you're on Rails DB migrate. Some timestamp, create foods migrating, create table, then create foods migrated. Did everybody get this? Yes, yes. 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 Rails DB migrate. All right. Notice that we checked everything before we ran the migration. If you realize afterwards that you made a mistake, you can roll back the last migration. It's like an undo to the migration. Rails DB rollback will revert the last migration, so you can fix it and Rails DB migrate forward. So Rails DB rollback will undo that last migration, so you can Rails DB migrate again. You need that if you realize by looking in your migration that you made a mistake after you've run the migration, right? Because that creates the table. What rollback does is deletes the table and puts it back in. So Rails DB rollback is the opposite of Rails DB migrate, undoes the last migration.
And you just run migrate again.
Then you just run migration again once you fixed it.
Is there always an undo to the specific command?
Not to
Or is
all
it
of them.
usually destroy or like rollback or?
Some commands have undos, some commands don't have undos.
Okay.
But Rails generate has Rails destroy, and Rails DB migrate has Rails DB rollback. Some do and some don't.
So beginner question. So when I want to change, like for example, like type
of the food, then can I just check the VS code and then change the type to like something else,
Mhm.
text?
If you've already migrated, then you have to roll back and migrate again. So if we decided that, hey, this category should be a text, and I change this to text, and I migrate, it doesn't do anything.
Oh.
But if I roll it back and then migrate, then it does. So if you change the migration, you might have to roll back the migration and then change it and roll it forward. If you created a second migration after that first migration, it gets more difficult to undo, right? So this is why we want to check our work each step of the way. Remember like week 1 and week 2 when we were doing JavaScript, I was like, always check your work along the way. It becomes more important here, right? Every time I was writing like a little click handler, I would do a console log to make sure that the click handler worked. I am constantly writing a little bit and checking, right? So when I do my scaffold, I check my migration. I look at every column and say, is that actually what I wanted? Yes, cool, I can move on. Cool. So we've done our migration. Let's run our Rails routes to see what routes we have in the system. And normally, I think this gets a little messy. So let's do Rails route minus G food, just to see our food routes, because that's the output's a little bit cleaner. Rails routes minus G food.
And
The dash G stands for grep.
grep.
Grep, G-R-E-P,
Oh, grep.
grep, which is another word for search. Grep. Grep. It's a searching tool. Grep. I think that's what it stands for.
Sounds.
That doesn't help. Okay. So these are all of the routes that we have in our system. We got these because we said foods is a resources, right? We get these routes because in our routes file we said resources foods. This makes a RESTful set of routes for our system. These are our RESTful routes. Get foods, post foods, get foods ID, patch foods ID, put foods ID, delete foods ID. Does index, create, show, update, and destroy.
Now you mentioned you weren't going to explain format. Could you?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
So if we wanted to support getting a list of all the foods in something other than JSON, we could say foods.csv and get a comma separated value. We could eventually extend this to do foods.xls and get an Excel spreadsheet out of the system.
Oh.
We can get foods.pdf and get a PDF out of the system, right? Like, oh, the menu for our kitchen. So that format is the dot extension we can put on the end of the URL, and then we, the programmer, can code for PDF. We can code for CSV. We can code for something else, right?
It's useful for my project.
Depending on what you need, you can support multiple formats. And that's what it's showing here, is that we can support multiple formats, right? The parentheses mean it's optional. The dot says it has to start with a dot. And then the colon format becomes the format param that our controller can use. I kind of wish it didn't show it here all the time, but whatever.
Right.
Right? So we know that if we get /foods, we call the index controller method. If we call post foods, we get the create method. We're finally at the point now when we can run Rails server. So let's run Rails server. And now let's open up Postman.
Of course, it's already.
Yeah, if you're already running another Rails application or you're running another app, you're going to get an already in use. So you should get something that says starting development. Maybe yours says Puma, codename Llamas in Pajamas.
That's funny.
So funny. Every release of Puma has a different funny codename, right? And it should say something like listening on gobbledygook, localhost 3000. Did everybody get something at least that looks pretty much like this at this point? Cool. And you're probably shutting something down. So if this is true, Then in Postman, I don't care about the update. I can close my little tabs here. And in my URL, I can put localhost 3000 / foods.
How do we get Postman?
You either have to download it and install it, or it may already be in your system. If you don't have it, it's getpostman.com. Getpostman.com. So hopefully if you put in localhost 3000 and you make sure it's a get and you hit send, you should get back an empty array. Because why did we get back an empty array?
You don't have any data.
We have no foods in our database. Exactly. There's no food in our database. Let's put a food in there. Right? So back in our terminal, if we run Rails routes-g food, this is why having a second terminal is helpful. We will see that if we want to create a food, this is what we have to do. So if you ask yourself, I want to destroy, update, show, create, list a food, this is the URL and the method that I need. So if you're like, hey, I'm writing my React code and I finally have my form filled out and I want to create a new Girl Scout troop, that's create troop. Do I see a create troops here? I sure do. The URL is this and it's a post. So you're looking for the thing you want to do to the thing you want to do to find the URL to use. So if we want to create foods, we must post /foods. So let's all try and create a food. So in another Postman, let's create a second Postman. Here, let's change this from a get to a post. Oh, it's at the top. And then localhost 3000 /foods.
Are we supposed to run the Postman?
Mm-hmm.
Still down.
Okay.
Updated.
We'll wait for you to catch up. So we have now, now we'll have one tab where we can get all the foods. We'll have another tab where we can create a food. Maybe we'll have another tab eventually where we can delete a food. So if we're going to be posting to /foods, we're going to need to supply the details about the food. That goes in the body of the request. If you remember when you all were doing React, did you do a post with the body, right, of the data? So the body is going to be a raw JSON. When we're creating a food, we're going to post a /foods because our routes told us that. The body of our request is going to be a raw JSON, right? So let's make an open and close object for our JSON. And what we're sending it is a food. So inside of this object, right, the main object, we have a food object. Now I like to go back and reference my database to see what makes up a food. I don't remember, it's been 5 minutes, I can't keep that many things in my brain. So let's talk about where we find out what does a food have in it. I could look in the migration, but the better place is in a file that gets created for you called schema.rb. The schema.rb is like the master, what are all the tables and columns? Remember you were all asking, hey, how do I see all the tables and columns? Well, fortunately for us, Rails keeps a file that just shows us all of the tables and columns. Well, look at that. There's foods. It has a name, a category, calories, price, a rating, a date, expires on, and gluten-free. Perfect. So the schema.rb is not a file that we ever touch. It's a file that Rails maintains for us, and it's like the master catalog of our entire database. It's very helpful when we're like, what attributes do foods have? Oh, I want to give my foods a name, tacos. I want to give my foods a category. Almost sandwiches. Right, the great debate, are tacos sandwiches or not? Calories. Let's say they only have 2 calories, because I love tacos. I know they have more than 2 calories. The price of tacos are $3. Rating, of course, tacos are a 5-star rating. Expires on, and now we have to give this a date. So let's give it a date in this format. 2019, 12, 25. They're going to expire on Christmas. And gluten-free?
Yes.
Yes. And there's our food. You all get Postman installed okay?
Yeah.
Windows
so
folks?
Just install.
Cool. So notice, right, an open and close bracket for the body. Then inside, we have a single food, which is itself a JSON object. And inside, we just have all the fields we want to fill in. Name, category, calories, price, rating, expires on, and gluten-free.
Honestly, was it large?
Big. Cool. Let's create this food and then see if we have foods, then we'll take a break. So let's create this food. When it runs, if we scroll down, we'll see the server's response. Yay, there's our very first food in our database. Right? It gave us an ID and some timestamps. There's our data. Once we post foods, who got a food? Did you get a food?
I'm still writing.
Cool.
Was after gluten-free true the send? Yeah,
Yes.
okay. the
Close
send
and
is-
close,
Okay,
and then send.
and send.
And let's see, did you get a ID 1? Tacos are almost sandwiches. I want to get everybody to this point.
Two for some reason.
Oh, you had already created a food, which is
I
fine.
maybe have clicked this twice on
Yeah.
accident. Okay.
Yeah, you might have 2 tacos.
Okay.
Never too many tacos.
That's true.
I didn't.
Are you running your server?
Oh,
No. So run Rails server.
but whenever I put new content,
Could not get
so I cannot touch it.
Right. That's why you need a second
Search
terminal.
and
Just like
search.
AppApp. Remember with AppApp, once we run it, we can't do anything else, we need a second terminal. Same thing. So now try and send this again.
invalid.
Nope, you got a problem. Here?
What does yours say here?
I have an invalid format.
You posted?
Yeah, well, it's saying that.
Are you in post?
You did not run migration.
Yeah,
In a different tab?
Rails
Yeah.
didn't migrate
Foods?
first.
Okay.
yeah.
Then run the server again and try.
And you're in raw JSON?
Yeah,
Oh, you're trying to send it? Okay, cool.
JSON.
Did you get your food
Name,
created?
category, calories.
No.
Did you have commas after everything?
Error.
Mhm.
Okay.
Yeah.
So now go look in your
And
Rails
then-
terminal
Two closing brackets.
where your server
Yeah.
is running.
Good.
Food.
And then
It's
it's
empty food.
I think I put food instead of foods.
That should be food. That's food singular here.
Okay.
Food singular.
so maybe I'm not
Just-
running it.
Yeah.
So Rails server, is that what?
There you go.
Yeah, like I mean, it's running server,
Okay,
but
so let's see what your Postman is saying.
where is it? Oh, there it is. So it's just it can.
Okay.
So it's looking for some sort of a syntax issue. But then
So where is your server?
right there.
Let's just double check.
That's okay.
So there you need an opening and closing brace
Around-
around the
oh.
food.
Oh, duh! Because it's an object.
It's
of,
an object, and the
oh.
object has food. Okay. Now, malformed. Oh. JSON Food is. Food is an object. I don't think these spaces matter, but it makes it easy for me to see.
Yeah. I wonder though if I mean, I'm pretty sure I created this, the food.
Yeah, it's saying it's a malphone request. Invalid HTTP format. Oh, you said HTTPS.
Oh, duh.
That's
Something so so small.
Food. Nope.
HTML.
HTML. You did not create this as an API. You missed the API part.
Oh, I didn't write API in the request. That's why. So, but don't
Yeah.
you do API then the name of it?
Well, when you did the Rails
First
new
one?
command, you were missing something.
I missed the API part.
Yeah.
It's like
Yeah.
I did the
Yeah.
One
skip
right here,
Spring
this was empty.
database,
Yeah.
You missed it.
Postgres API,
Yeah.
It's supposed to
then
be a
kitchen.
post,
That's what I did.
the one that we're doing for the food.
Oh,
Yeah, so just change that to a
So
post.
I'll give you. I'll just put this in here.
In a new, yeah, like a new tab, yeah.
I never remember
Wait,
Where?
that.
So did you have like that first get? Yeah, you have this one, so just that one's supposed to be empty,
Okay.
but you're not supposed to be in raw, you were just supposed to be in, let me put mine here, just.
No.
Get is just pretty, and then it's in JSON, yeah, and send.
And then post.
Now post, now that you have an error because of this, but post is
Rails,
is
DB.
this stuff.
No.
I'll change it to,
yeah, I split it to
Body.
like one.
Gotcha.
body raw
What's it say?
JSON. Now we
Yeah,
can
what-
put this in there, yeah? And then
Cool.
you can,
Skip. The
okay,
flash.
and now you should be able to
That's what we have to do.
send it, and then everything down here will be.
I get track of
Sure,
everything
that's
we're doing,
calories.
so I could do the
Two. There's no, oh, you need a comma after that, sandwiches, yeah.
destroy.
Now send it. Should be, oh, what's wrong here? What does it say? Did you run Rails server, like you mentioned? Yeah, do that. Yeah, Rails server. Maybe integrators.
And what you're getting back. It's creating the foods, but you're getting back
HTML.
HTML. So unfortunately, you're going to have to stick JSON in there. There we go.
Okay, cool.
It's all because you missed the API bit.
Yeah, yeah.
I should probably put that first on the list. Did you get
Still has a
that?
little server, or error.
It still says you need to run Rails to be migrate. Your migration did not run because you wrote in oops. So let's look at your migration. It should be integer. Now we're running Rails server. Now there's foods, right? Here's your create your food. There's your first food. You get a food created?
No. Like I posed an hour and a half ago from you.
Right. So, just do a click there. No, that's not it. Oh, you're still download Postman in the browser. Did you not download the Postman?
I did.
Put Postman in here. We didn't install it. You downloaded it?
Yeah.
Cool. So run that setup. Okay. While he's doing that, let's double check that our foods are all in there by going back to the other that we created here. And if we hit send for our get, we should get at least one food, maybe more, depending on how many times you hit.
2 tacos,
You
yeah.
have two different tacos,
Yeah.
or maybe you got 3 or 4, depending on how often you submitted.
2 taco sandwiches, please.
Taco burrito.
Sandwiches.
So if you're at that point, let's take our break. And when we come back, let's add a couple of features to the app. So you can see how we add new things, kind of like what you're supposed to do on homework last night. And then we'll see if we can maybe get a React app connected to this.
Yeah, I just don't think I was using Postman correctly.